Your relocation is necessary, the flight attendant announced, forcing the quiet teen from her first-class seat to accommodate a wealthier-looking woman. The attendant Paula saw only a girl in a hoodie who didn't belong, and smirked as she sent her to the back. Paula was oblivious to one critical fact: the teen was Tessa, the secret owner of the entire airline. As Tessa was banished to a middle seat, she sent a single text to her father. Paula believed she had maintained order. She had no idea that text had just alerted the executive tower. The sun dipped low in the sky above the airport, casting a gentle golden glow over everything. Tessa gripped her boarding pass firmly as she approached the gate, her heart racing with a blend of anticipation and anxiety. This was her inaugural solo journey, a gift from her father for achieving the highest honors in her class. He astonished her with a first-class ticket, expressing that she was worthy of experiencing the world in luxury. Wearing a simple grey hoodie and scuffed sneakers, Tessa felt she blended in with the other travelers. In all honesty, she favored it that way. Fitting in was more secure and simpler. She boarded the plane, offering a courteous nod to the attendants at the entrance, and settled into her window seat 2D. The seat was spacious and plush, adorned with a neatly folded thick blanket resting on top. Tessa grinned softly, tucking her backpack beneath the seat ahead and retrieving a beloved well-read novel. Surrounding her, elegantly attired men and women took their places conversing quietly or scrolling through their phones. A handful of people looked her way, some intrigued, while others remained apathetic. Tessa lowered her gaze, hoping to avoid any notice. As the cabin door shut moments later, a flight attendant named Paula started her rounds in first class, ensuring seatbelts were fastened and sharing gentle smiles. She exuded a keen elegance from her impeccably styled hair to the exact fold in her skirt. Paula welcomed an older gentleman in a business suit with a cheerful laugh and presented a blanket to a woman adorned with pearls. However, upon reaching Tessa, her smile faltered. Paula paused next to her row, straightening the sleeve of her jacket before she began to speak. "Pardon me, miss," she remarked, her tone friendly, yet succinct. "Are you certain this is your seat?" Tessa glanced up, taken aback, and nodded rapidly. She dug into her hoodie pocket and retrieved her ticket. "Indeed, it's two-dimensional," she remarked. Paula accepted the ticket and examined it with a restrained smile, her gaze shifting between the paper and Tessa repeatedly. Just as she was about to speak further, another woman joined Paul at her side. She stood tall in a sharp white blazer, holding a handbag that likely exceeded the total value of Tessa's entire college wardrobe. The name tag she wore said, Rachel Evans Brooks. Although she spoke softly to Paula, Tessa was able to catch every word. "Is something wrong? I was informed that this seat was being set up for me." Paula acknowledged Rachel Evans Brooks with a nod before redirecting her attention to Tessa, raising her voice to ensure those around could listen in. "It appears that there has been a mistake with the seating arrangement. Your relocation is necessary to ensure this guest can be accommodated." Tessa gazed at her, a look of bewilderment crossing her features. "However, this is my seat," she murmured softly. "I possess the ticket." Rachel Evans Brooks fidgeted beside them, drumming her perfectly manicured nails on the handle of her bag. Paula's smile grew even more strained. "I see your point, but this seat was designated for our frequent flyer member," she indicated, pointing towards Rachel Evans Brooks. "We'll arrange a seat for you towards the back. I appreciate your understanding." Attention was beginning to shift now. Tessa sensed the stares pressing down on her. A burdensome weight her chest constricted. She felt the urge to protest and stand her ground. Yet the intense heat of embarrassment undermined her determination. With trembling hands, she snatched her backpack and tucked her book inside, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Rachel Evans Brooks took the seat immediately after Tessa rose without a word or a look in her direction. Paula nodded, signaling in agreement, and led Tessa to the rear of the plane. She found herself wedged into a middle seat close to the restrooms, the aroma of cleaning products and musty air thick surrounding her. She settled into her seat with a rigid posture, gazing at the tray table before her, fighting back the urge to cry. She retrieved her phone from her bag and quickly composed a brief message to her father. I was relocated to the back because someone else required my seat. I chose not to engage in a dispute. She hit send and stowed the phone, leaning her forehead against the cool glass of the window. The engines roared to life below her, yet her thoughts were racing too quickly to pay attention. In the first-class cabin, Rachel Evans Brooks savoured her champagne as Paula made her way down the aisle, serving drinks and wearing a strange smile, already dismissing the girl she had overlooked. The captain spoke softly into his headset, but neither of them noticed. Neither of them realized that Tessa's father was far from an ordinary dad. He was the creator and proprietor of the airline they were currently flying with. Tessa remained motionless in her tight economy seat as the plane ascended into the sky. She hardly felt the sensation of weightlessness as the aircraft ascended. Her thoughts continued to cycle through the recent events. She was innocent of any wrongdoing. She had shown courtesy. She possessed her ticket. Nevertheless, she had been cast aside as though she were an outsider. She gazed vacantly at the seat back ahead, a lump rising in her throat that she was determined to suppress. She refused to shed a tear, absent not in the presence of unfamiliar faces. Her phone vibrated against her lap. She glanced down and noticed a response from her father. His message was concise yet resolute. Maintain your composure. No need to be concerned. I've got it under control. Tessa gulped her heart, pounding more intensely. Her father typically maintained a composed demeanor. Yet she understood that when he claimed he was taking care of a situation, it signaled that others were about to discover the gravity of their mistake. In first class, Paula completed her last checks and made her way back to the galley wearing a satisfied smile. Rachel Evans Brooks leaned back in her seat and donned a silk eye mask, preparing for what she anticipated would be a tranquil flight. Paula quickly poured herself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, engaging in a soft conversation with another attendant named Brooke. Certain individuals simply failed to grasp the situation, Paula remarked with a light chuckle. Not everyone is suited for first class. It's evident when someone feels out of place. Brooke remained quiet, having observed the girl's evident discomfort. She had seen the ticket and was aware that the seat assignment was accurate. However, Brooke understood Paula well enough to refrain from speaking up. Paula had a knack for causing issues for those who dared to cross her. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain James Sullivan adjusted his headset to take a call from ground control on the private line. His eyebrows raised slightly as he listened intently. He didn't interject, merely nodded slowly and replied with a straightforward, "Understood. I will handle it." Setting the headset aside, he glanced at his co-pilot Ethan Walsh, who looked back with a raised eyebrow, silently asking, "What's up?" Ethan Walsh inquired. Captain James Sullivan responded with a brief, restrained smile. "It appears we have a situation brewing in first class. Relocation of passengers. It appears that the young woman who moved to the back possesses more than merely a seat on this plane." Ethan Walsh blinked his eyes. "You must be joking." Captain James Sullivan sighed in disbelief. Michael Harper, her father, and the founder, as well as the majority owner of this airline, is currently observing all the events from the executive tower. Ethan Walsh emitted a soft whistle. Paul is on the verge of experiencing a truly terrible day. The captain offered a brief nod before reaching for the intercom. His voice was steady and professional, yet it held a sharpness that was absent previously. "Attention, flight crew. We have received information regarding an urgent seating issue that requires prompt attention. The lead flight attendant is requested to report to the cockpit at the earliest opportunity." In the galley, Paula stood up, a look of confusion on her face as she turned to Brooke, who merely shrugged in response. Paula placed her coffee cup down leisurely and headed toward the front, blissfully oblivious to the fact that her life was on the brink of a sudden upheaval. Paula adjusted her uniform with care as she neared the cockpit door, putting on a bright smile. She tapped gently and paused. At 9:00 a.m., the door swung open and Captain James Sullivan gestured for her to enter. She entered with assurance anticipating perhaps a brief mention regarding customer service or a concern related to a passenger complaint. She was taken back by the icy stern gazes directed at her by both pilots. "Please take a seat, Paula." Captain James Sullivan said, his tone courteous, yet devoid of warmth. She paused for just a moment before settling into the jump seat behind them, the door closing with a gentle click, enveloping them in a realm of soft beeps and the constant hum of the engine. Captain James Sullivan shifted in his seat to better face her. He stated calmly that corporate headquarters has reached out to us concerning an incident that took place during boarding. Paula blinked, a sense of confusion constricting her chest. "What kind of situation are we discussing?" she reiterated. "The young lady you took from seat 2D," he went on, his tone quiet yet piercing. "I had full authorization to be seated there. She possessed a first-class ticket. No errors were made." Paula parted her lips, seeking the right words, but the captain gestured for silence. "It continues to deteriorate. Her name is Emma Carter. Michael Harper is her father." The name struck her with the force of a blow. Paula straightened her posture, feeling her mouth become parched. She recognized the name from before. Naturally, it was common knowledge among everyone in the airline industry. Michael Harper was more than merely the founder. He embodied the image, the wealth, and the influence that drove it all. Sir Brennan made a direct call to ground operations. Captain James Sullivan stated, his voice slicing through the dense atmosphere. He was exceptionally clear. "Action needs to be taken without delay. Please return the passenger to her original seat. You will issue a public apology, and upon our arrival, you will have a formal review meeting with the company executives." Paula sensed the color leave her face. She had handled irate customers in the past. She had addressed complaints and won over challenging passengers. This situation was unlike any other. This was not merely about an overlooked drink order or a misplaced bag. This involved embarrassing the owner's daughter in front of a crowd on the plane. "I was unaware." Paula faltered the words, leaving a sour taste in her mouth. "You didn't take the time to verify." Captain James Sullivan made a correction to her. He kept his voice steady, yet the disappointment in his tone cut deeper than any shout could. "You evaluated her based on her appearance, and now it's time to make amends." He grabbed the intercom and pressed a button. "Crew, please note, lead flight attendant Paula kindly returned to cabin 2 without delay." Paula rose unsteadily, her heart pounding fiercely within her chest. She exited the cockpit in silence, her thoughts a tumultuous mix of fear and remorse. As she walked through the first-class cabin, she sensed the inquisitive gazes of the passengers upon her. They were unaware of the unfolding events, but that would soon change. They would do so shortly. For the first time in her career, Paula found herself wishing she could sink into the floor. Tessa remained still in her confined seat, her arms crossed firmly over her chest. She gazed out the window, observing the clouds float by effortlessly. Yet her thoughts were anything but serene. Her phone vibrated once more in her lap, prompting her to look down at a brief new message from her father. "Remain in your current position. Allow them to approach you." She swiftly hid the phone, eager to keep it out of sight from those nearby. She sensed the abrupt shift in energy even before she raised her gaze. A silence appeared to envelop the cabin. Passengers adjusted in their seats, straining their necks to peer down the aisle. Tessa glanced to the side and noticed Paula approaching her movements, rigid, her smile forced and unsettling. Paula paused at her brow, her cheeks tinged with pink as she bent down a bit to meet their gaze. "Miss Brennan." She called out, her voice carrying to those around them. "There seems to have been a mix-up with your seating arrangement. We would like to ask you to go back to your original seat in first class." Tessa blinked slowly, maintaining a composed expression. She sensed the weight of every gaze upon her at that moment. Rumors had begun to circulate. Paula moved uncomfortably, managing a faint smile. "We truly regret any inconvenience this may have caused." Tessa hesitated to move immediately. She allowed the silence to linger just enough to make Paula uncomfortable. She then regarded her with a cool gaze. Are you suggesting that I was in the correct seat all along? Paula's cheeks flushed with color. She nodded rigidly. Absolutely, ma'am. Your words resonated with me as Tessa allowed the question to linger unspoken. Paula parted her lips, yet silence enveloped her. She fought to find a reply that wouldn't worsen her situation. Yet nothing she could utter would alter the reality that everyone had witnessed. Tessa rose at last, her posture upright, and her chin lifted with confidence. She lifted her backpack gradually, allowing Paula to fully absorb the significance of the moment. The passengers around no longer bothered to maintain any semblance of politeness. A few gazed openly. Some averted their gaze, feeling ashamed for having observed in silence. Tessa silently moved into the aisle. Paula signaled for her to come along, her motions rigid and anxious. As they made their way back to first class, it felt as though the whole plane was observing them. Tessa maintained her focus ahead, growing more empowered with each stride, not out of a desire for revenge, but because she realized that they all witnessed it. Everyone was aware of what had transpired. This time, everyone was aware, and could no longer feign ignorance. Tessa arrived at the first-class cabin, sensing the heavy tension that filled the atmosphere. All the passengers in the gleaming leather seats glanced in her direction. Certain expressions revealed astonishment, while others displayed remorse. Some gazed vacantly, uncertain of how to proceed. Rachel Evans Brooks, the woman who had occupied her seat earlier, remained motionless, her eyes wide and concealed behind her large sunglasses. Paula gestured to the vacant seat, the one by the window, that was meant for Tessa all along. Tessa halted her hand, lingering on the back of the seat for a brief moment. She shifted slightly, her voice unwavering, yet distinct enough for the closest to hear. I had my ticket. I presented it when I got on. She stated, her demeanor relaxed, nearly nonchalant. Yet it seems some individuals believed I had no place here. The statement was straightforward, yet it sliced through the cabin with piercing intensity. At 15:31, several passengers fidgeted restlessly in their seats. A man dressed in a navy suit coughed softly and averted his gaze. Paula began to speak, but swiftly shut her mouth, understanding that her words would only complicate matters further. Tessa took her seat, avoiding any further looks at Paula or Rachel Evans Brooks. She carefully placed her backpack under the seat ahead and retrieved her book, opening it once more, as if nothing had transpired. However, the ambience had transformed entirely. Paula lingered uncomfortably next to her for a moment, then bent down rigidly. If you require any assistance, please don't hesitate to inform me, she whispered. Tessa kept her gaze fixed on her book, turning a page, as the gentle sound of paper rustling echoed louder than any word she might have uttered. Paula straightened, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and quickly retreated toward the galley. The rest of first class appeared momentarily stunned. Gradually, conversations picked up again, but they were subdued, laced with furtive glances and hushed whispers. The passengers may have returned to their drinks and magazines, yet the haunting image lingered in their minds. For Paula, the gravity of that moment was starting to bear down on her. She staggered back into the galley, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the edge of the counter. She sensed the sweat pooling at the nape of her neck, even with the cabin's cool air. Brooke lingered close by, fining the task of arranging snacks on a tray. Yet her gaze darted up, occasionally observing. Are you all right? Brooke inquired, her tone subdued. Paula cast her a glance, one so piercing it could shatter glass. I'm fine, she retorted. Yet deep down, she knew she wasn't fine. Not even close. Her thoughts surged, revisiting each choice she had made since boarding. It was clear to her now that she had crossed an irreversible boundary. Brooke paused before continuing. You realize she's not just another passenger? Correct. Paula responded with a firm nod, her voice barely above a whisper. I've come to a conclusion. Brooke pursed her lips, casting a glance at the curtain that divided them from first class. You should probably think about what you'll say when we arrive. This situation goes beyond simply relocating someone. Not this time. Paula remained silent. She was unable to respond, consumed by her efforts to stave off panic. Every error she had committed now loomed larger, more burdensome, seemingly unresolvable. She recalled her initial training for this role, where she had absorbed the importance of treating every passenger with dignity. Yet she had disregarded those principles without a second thought. There had been no pause when she noticed Tessa sitting there, simply dressed, youthful, and alone. The repercussions were catching up to her more swiftly than she could escape. In first class, however, Tessa remained composed in her seat, casually flipping through her book. She wasn't focused on the words. Instead, she was attuned to the subtle shifts in her surroundings, the restless movements of fellow passengers, the tour inflection of Paula's voice from beyond the curtain, and the way some first-class guests deliberately averted their gaze from her. She saw no reason to create a disturbance. Her quiet demeanor conveyed more than words ever could, and she was aware that her father would not allow this matter to conclude peacefully. Rachel Evans Brooks, in the adjacent row, nervously toyed with her handbag, stealing glances at Tessa before hastily averting her gaze. The woman who had so effortlessly claimed Tessa's seat now appeared as though she wished to disappear entirely. Tessa reclined her head against the seat and shut her eyes for a brief moment, allowing the soft hum of the engines to envelop her. She sensed that something was brewing, something more significant than a mere apology, and she was prepared for it. The flight went on, yet the atmosphere in the cabin had transformed into something peculiar and weighty. Tessa maintained her gaze on the window, finding interest in the endless expanse of clouds above. Yet her mind remained alert. She sensed the furtive looks directed at her from across the aisle from behind the seats, even from those passengers who had previously overlooked her entirely. They were observing now, acting engrossed in their books or screens, but the palpable guilt in the atmosphere was nearly tangible. In the galley, Paula paced in quick, measured strides, her anxiety escalating with every moment. Brooke occupied herself with organizing snack trays, clearly making an effort to remain unobtrusive. She had no desire to be caught in the aftermath. Paula pressed her palm to her forehead, attempting to gather her thoughts. Perhaps offering a drink would help. Perhaps if she offered an additional blanket. Perhaps if she expressed her apologies once more, this time with genuine sincerity. Maybe that could help mend the situation. Yet a profound part of her understood that none of it would truly make a difference. Not considering Tessa's father's identity, not given the extent of the public embarrassment. As Paula fidgeted with her hands, the intercom above her emitted a crackling sound. "Flight attendants, please prepare for a mid-flight review." The announcement lacked clarity, yet the tone was unmistakable. This was not a standard flight protocol. Paula felt a sharp twist in her stomach. She understood that this was not related to service or safety. It was about her. Captain James Sullivan had issued another directive, and Michael Harper had ensured that whatever was about to unfold would be anything but discreet. Paula inhaled deeply, adjusting her jacket and forcing a fragile smile. She re-entered first class, maneuvering the cart in front of her with rigid arms. "May I offer you anything, miss?" she inquired, as she paused next to Tessa's seat, her voice unnaturally cheerful. Tessa gradually shifted her gaze, her eyes steady yet sharp. The cabin fell silent, every ear attentive. "I'm fine," Tessa murmured, turning another page in her book. Paula's smile wavered, yet she nodded and stepped back, her hands gripping the card's handle. As she proceeded down the aisle, a man in a grey suit leaned in slightly toward Tessa. His voice was soft and uncertain. "Miss, I just wanted to mention that I witnessed what occurred earlier. It was unjust." Tessa gazed at him for a brief moment, examining his features. She offered a courteous nod, yet remained silent. There was no necessity for her to do so. A different woman, an elderly lady sitting 2 rows in front, glanced back slightly. Had I been aware she started feeling uneasy? I might have spoken up. Tessa offered a small smile before turning back to her book. The passengers were welcome to retain their apologies. By remaining silent, they had made their decision. They were now able to embrace that discomfort. In the meantime, Paula moved to the front of the plane, her heart racing. She believed that remaining silent until they touched down might bring some peace to the situation. Perhaps it will all pass in time. She was mistaken for, as she arrived at the front galley, Captain James Sullivan's voice resonated through the cabin once more. This time, more polished, yet undeniably authoritative. Dear guests, we sincerely regret any previous inconvenience caused by the seating arrangements. We are happy to let you know that the issue has been resolved. Thank you for your understanding. It seemed innocuous. For most passengers, it likely seemed trivial, but to Paula, it resonated as a warning, a definitive indication that the airline was not going to allow this to fade away unnoticed. She pressed firmly against the counter, her legs quaking beneath her. Deep down, she sensed that something greater awaited her as soon as those wheels made contact with the ground. It was a situation she couldn't talk her way out of. Tessa adjusted herself in her chair, the supple leather groaning slightly as she looked down at her phone lying on her lap. A new message had just come in from her father. She gently tapped the screen. The gate will be monitored by security and executive personnel. Maintain your composure. You will receive a personal escort. She put the phone away without showing any response. Unbeknownst to them as they sat there, fining normally a tempest was already brewing just beneath the surface. Rachel Evans Brooks, now seated rigidly in the chair across the aisle, glanced over her sunglasses at Tessa, her lips forming a firm line. She felt a wave of discomfort as Tessa's eyes briefly locked onto hers. Rachel Evans Brooks swiftly averted her gaze, awkwardly adjusting the luxurious bracelet on her wrist. The opulence, the ease, the subtle yet potent influence that individuals such as Rachel Evans Brooks believed they possessed. It was now eluding them, substituted by uncomfortable silence and insincere grins. Brooke maneuvered the cart leisurely along the aisle, fining an inspection of the drink orders. Though she tried her hardest to blend into the background, her eyes revealed her anxiety. She cast a fleeting glance at Tessa before swiftly turning her gaze back ahead. She was eager to distance herself from this chaos as much as possible. Paula stayed in the galley, her back against the wall, breathing lightly. She had grabbed a pile of cups merely to occupy her hands. Yet the subtle quivering in her fingers persisted. Each time she considered what awaited them upon landing, her stomach knotted up even more tightly. Conversations with executives were always formal. Their gatherings lacked warmth and friendliness. These were inquiries. In this situation, given Michael Harper's daughter is involved, there will be no opportunities for a do-over. The loudspeaker crackled once more, and Captain James Sullivan's voice emerged, now smoother, yet imbued with a subtle authority that commanded the attention of every passenger. "Cabin crew, please get ready for our initial descent." The announcement was typical. As soon as he uttered those words, an unfamiliar tension filled the cabin. It was clear to all that arriving was about much more than merely disembarking from the aircraft this time. For certain individuals, it signified continuing with their daily routine. For some, it signified a moment of truth. Tessa carefully tightened her seatbelt, sensing the plane angle downwards as it commenced its gradual descent. She looked out the window at the expanding mosaic of cities and fields beneath her. Her heart thudded rhythmically in her chest. Yet, it was not fear that she experienced. It was a calm assurance. There was no need for her to raise her voice or create a disturbance to reveal the truth of the situation. All she required was a bit of patience. The consequences were now unfolding in their own due course. Rachel Evans Brooks was now fidgeting more visibly across the aisle, tugging at the hem of her sleeve, and casting anxious glances at the curtain that divided first class from the rest of the cabin. Tessa averted her gaze once more. There was no necessity for her to do so. Rachel Evans Brooks' unease served as a unique form of apology. The aircraft trembled softly as it descended through the clouds, the landing gear locking into position below them. Tessa placed her hands gracefully in her lap, her expressions serene, her breaths even and controlled. In the kitchen, Paula remained motionless, gazing at the shut door, her mind racing. Perhaps she should offer another apology. Perhaps she could provide an explanation. Yet beneath it all, she understood that none of it held significance anymore. She made a decision when she gazed at Tessa and concluded that she didn't fit in. Her decision was supported by her actions, and no amount of words could change the reality that the wrong individual had been observing every moment of it. The cabin lights dimmed gently as the plane descended nearer to the runway. The wheels let out a faint screech upon landing, the plane bouncing slightly before gliding smoothly along the runway. Tessa maintained her hands in a folded position, her gaze unwavering as the plane approached the gate. Her phone vibrated once again. She looked down, but did not reach for it. The security team is on standby. Please remain in your seat. They will approach you initially. The engines whirred as the plane came to a halt. The seatbelt indicator chimed off. Passengers started to collect their things, feigning a sense of normalcy around her. However, it was far from ordinary. That's no longer the case. Those who had observed in silence, who remained mute during her humiliation, would now witness firsthand what genuine accountability entailed. The well-known sound of the seatbelt sign turning off resonated through the cabin. Yet everyone remained still for a moment. The typical rush for overhead compartments and hasty farewells gave way to an unusual calm, as if everyone sensed an impending event. Yet no one dared to break the silence. Tessa remained in her seat, composed and still. Her backpack remained neatly tucked under the seat in front of her. With deliberate, gentle movements, she flattened the front of her hoodie, acutely aware of the multitude of stares bearing down on her, yet choosing to ignore each one. A gentle hum emanated from the cabin doors, and shortly after the door swung wide open. Rather than the typical jet bridge attendant, 2 uniformed security personnel boarded the aircraft. They maintained a composed demeanor, yet their seriousness was evident as their eyes scanned the cabin, conveying a wordless message. A man in a dark navy suit held a clipboard as he stood behind them. His identification badge gleamed beneath the overhead lights. An experienced operations manager for the airline. The passengers tensed up. Some stretched their necks to get a clearer view. Some averted their gaze to their laps, feigning ignorance of the abrupt arrival of authority moving down the aisle. The operations manager communicated with clarity, maintaining a courteous yet assertive tone. "Emma Carter?" he inquired, although he was already aware he spotted her right away, seated with a serene grace that enveloped the area around her. Tessa lifted her hand gently, indicating silently. The manager offered a slight nod. "Miss Brennan, please stay seated for a moment. We will be taking you off first." The tension in the cabin grew more intense. Passengers murmured quietly among themselves, casting furtive looks between Tessa, the officers, and the stunned flight attendant who stood motionless at the front. Rachel Evans Brooks turned ashen, retreating into her seat as if she wished to vanish into the fabric. The manager shifted slightly, surveying the team. His voice, while remaining composed, carried a distinct sharpness now. Lead flight attendant Karen Mitchell said, "Please join us as well." Paula stood still, unable to move. She clutched the beverage cart with such intensity that her knuckles became pale. She tried to speak up to clarify, but found herself at a loss for words. As she stepped unsteadily into the aisle, it felt as though her legs were acting independently. The manager maintained a calm demeanor. There was no need for him to do that. Every word he uttered exuded authority, as directed by Mr. Brennan's office. "You are to meet with airline officials right away concerning today's incident." Travelers leaned into the aisle, staring unabashedly. Some attempted to feign disinterest, yet their expressions clearly revealed their curiosity. A few expressions even revealed a hint of satisfaction, observing someone who had once exuded such commanding presence, now faltering in embarrassment. Tessa rose to her feet as the officer kindly gestured for her to stand. She repositioned her backpack on one shoulder, maintaining an upright posture, her pace deliberate yet unwavering. As she walked down the aisle, she noticed brief flashes of the passengers' responses. The man who had attempted to give her a hesitant apology before now avoided her gaze. The elderly woman who claimed she would have voiced her thoughts gazed intently at the ground. Rachel Evans Brooks, still slumped in her seat, whispered something quietly, but Tessa continued on without pausing or acknowledging her. At this point, Rachel Evans Brooks' words held no significance. Paula trailed a few steps behind, her cheeks flushed and her heart racing so intensely that she felt certain everyone could hear it. Her eyes remained fixed on the carpet, feeling more vulnerable than she ever had before. As they arrived at the plane's door, the security officer moved aside, permitting Tessa to be the first to step out. The operations manager made a respectful gesture, recognizing her status without uttering a word. She stepped onto the jet bridge. The gentle click of her sneakers on the floor being the sole sound she concentrated on. As Paula emerged into the glaring terminal lights, she blinked quickly, overwhelmed by the stark reality of her circumstances, washing over her like a frigid wave. At the end of the jet bridge stood more formally dressed executives, their expressions serious and quiet. At that moment, Paula realized this was more than simply an apology or a meeting. This was a matter of survival, and her career was precariously at stake. Tessa halted just within the terminal, glancing back at the aircraft she had recently departed from. Her expression lacked a smile. She wasn't boasting. Her expression was calm, inscrutable. Yet her mere presence conveyed more than any words ever could. She was compelled to leave her seat because someone determined she didn't align with their idea of who should be in first class. However, at this point, everyone was fully aware of her identity. This time, it was indelible. Tessa remained composed as the airport personnel and security cleared a path for her to navigate through the terminal. Individuals at the adjacent gates halted their discussions, some halting their coffee cups mid-sip, while others stretched their necks to see what was unfolding. Such a sight was not something they encountered daily. Tessa glided silently, her movements deliberate and assured. There was no need for her to speak. The sight of the suited executives following her made it clear to everyone that she was a significant figure, one who commanded attention and respect. Paula trailed several paces behind her gaze, cast downward her heart, pounding so fiercely in her ears that the soft shuffle of footsteps nearby was nearly drowned out. She noticed the spectators, their eyes wide, murmuring softly as they subtly took out their phones to record the scene. Her cheeks flushed more intensely with each step she took. At the walkway's conclusion, a tall figure in a fitted black suit stood with his arms crossed. His expression was serene, yet his gaze was piercing. Nathan Clark served as the Director of Customer Experience for the airline. At 3404, it was clear that his reputation was well known throughout the company, firm professional and completely relentless regarding any mistreatment of customers. He remained expressionless as Paula came closer. He didn't acknowledge her at all. He instead directed his attention to Tessa, offering her a courteous nod. "Welcome, Miss Brennan," he said, his voice calm and assured. "We have organized a private vehicle for you to ensure a comfortable continuation of your journey. Your baggage has been successfully secured." Tessa acknowledged with a nod, her expression composed, revealing no hint of her feelings. Adrian then turned his gaze towards Paula, his demeanor becoming even more distant. "Ms. Hayes, you will be joining us." Paula parted her lips, eager to articulate her thoughts and defend her perspective. But Adrienne raised a hand, instantly quieting her. "A comprehensive investigation will be conducted. Your opportunity to express yourself will come, but not in this setting." Security officers stood beside her, maintaining their distance, yet clearly indicating that she was to comply. Passengers and staff at the terminal openly gawked, with some murmuring and others shaking their heads in disbelief. The shame that Paula had once so effortlessly inflicted upon others now clung to her like heavy chains, impossible to escape. Tessa approached a stylish black car that was stationed just beyond the glass doors. A uniformed driver gracefully opened the back door for her, accompanied by a subtle bow. She glided into the car, the leather seats refreshing against her skin. With the door shutting behind her, she finally permitted herself a deep, calming breath. The vehicle departed from the curb, the airport diminishing in the distance behind her. Tessa gazed through the tinted window, catching glimpses of the terminal. The bustling travelers, the lengthy security queues, and the everyday world continuing to turn beyond the confines of the power and privilege that had just crumbled around Paula. Within the airport, Paula was guided down a distinct corridor away from the bustling terminals toward a pair of grey double doors that most employees preferred to avoid encountering closely. Beyond those doors lay a modest conference room designated for executive reviews. Many who stepped into those rooms left without a badge. With each step, Paula's thoughts surged forward. She reflected on the day she received her job offer, the sense of pride that had filled her in the countless hours she had dedicated to her work. She reflected on how effortless it had become to form swift opinions about passengers, how commonplace it had seemed to determine who fit in and who did not. She convinced herself it was a matter of organization, of maintaining professionalism. Yet now, devoid of her power, she perceived it for what it truly was, unrestrained bias, harsh and unappealing. The doors opened before her, and she was welcomed inside. Adrian walked in after her, setting a hefty folder on the table before taking a seat opposite her. He carefully opened the file, taking his time as he flipped through the documents within. Printed complaints, witness statements, and even screenshots captured from the security cameras in the cabin. Every piece of evidence weighed down on Paula, suffocating the last remnants of her hope. Adrian glanced upward, his tone remaining professional, yet distant. Madam Hayes, you are present to address significant issues related to misconduct and breaches of customer service protocols. Is there anything you'd like to express before we start? Paula gulped, her throat parched. She yearned to justify herself, to explain that it wasn't as it appeared. Yet, as she faced Adrienne, fully aware of her actions, she understood that there was nothing she could utter that would improve the situation. Tessa reclined in the plush seat of the car as it glided effortlessly toward a private lounge where her father awaited. She looked at her phone, where a message from him flashed on the screen. "Proud of you for staying calm. See you soon." Tessa offered a faint smile, not from victory, but from a sense of serene contentment. She had managed to keep her composure. She had not resisted. She allowed the truth to assert itself. At times, the truth bore a weight greater than anything else. Within the sterile confines of the conference room, the clock ticked audibly each second, amplifying the tension in the atmosphere. Paula sat rigidly in the unforgiving chair opposite Adrian Burke, feeling akin to a student on the verge of reprimand. This situation was even more dire. It wasn't merely a reprimand. It was her professional life unraveling before her eyes. Adrian turned to another page in the folder, his gaze swiftly scanning the documents before he began to speak. We have statements from 4 first-class passengers who observed the removal of Miss Brennan from her designated seat. Each of them affirmed that you interrogated her without justification and favored another passenger without thoroughly reviewing the manifest. Paula felt a dryness in her mouth. She gripped her hands firmly in her lap, yearning for something, anything, that could reverse the events of the past few hours. "I didn't mean any harm," she croaked, her voice barely audible. Adrian's expression remained unchanged. Good intentions do not negate actions, Ms. Hayes, particularly when those actions pertain to discrimination against a paying customer. He hesitated for a moment, lightly tapping the file. The daughter of the airline's owner. Paula cast her gaze downward, a deep sense of shame overwhelming her. Adrienne maintained a steady tone. Alongside passenger complaints, your colleague Ashley Turner filed an internal report. He retrieved another sheet of paper. She had witnessed your interaction with Miss Brennan and expressed worry about your conduct. Paula's head shot up, feeling a sharp sense of betrayal. Brooke, the very same Brooke who had maintained a low profile throughout the flight, had reported her. As if sensing her unease, Adrian interjected. Miss Davis acknowledged that although she did not take action in the moment, a separate discussion would follow regarding that decision. She felt compelled to record her observations. Upon discovering the identity of the passenger, he gradually closed the file, the sound of the folder snapping shut causing Paula to flinch slightly. Adrian clasped his hands on the table. Ms. Pays, given the evidence, the airline is suspending you immediately without pay while we conduct a final review for termination. Paula began to protest, but he spoke resolutely. You will not resume active duty until this issue is resolved. We anticipate your complete cooperation with the investigation. Any refusal will lead to immediate termination with no chance for rehire at any location. The gravity of those words weighed heavily on her. She felt the urge to argue, to clarify that it was merely a misunderstanding. Yet deep down she recognized the truth. She hadn't challenged the other first-class passengers. She hadn't requested the man in the tailored suit to present his ticket. She had not confronted the woman adorned in pearls. Instead, she had glanced at Tessa, youthful and simply attired, and made a judgment solely based on looks. Now she was facing the consequences. In the meantime, Tessa's vehicle entered a private entrance designated for executives and VIPs. A second black car was already stationed there, and beside it stood her father, Michael Harper, tall and commanding with a presence that could dominate any space. He observed his daughter exiting the vehicle. Tessa approached him with a straight posture and a composed expression. Jacob met her halfway, resting a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he inquired, his tone soft, yet laced with worry. "I'm fine," Tessa replied, matter-of-factly. And indeed she was. She refused to let the ordeal defeat her. Instead, it had fortified something within her, a subtle flame that would not be easily extinguished. Jacob observed her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. You managed the situation more gracefully than most adults could." He gestured for her to enter the exclusive lounge. As they strolled through the elegant, gleaming corridors, Jacob spoke with a calm demeanor. "The board has been informed. Adjustments will be implemented. Training initiatives will be revised. Oversight regulations will be reinforced." Tessa absorbed the information but remained silent. For her, it transcended policies. It wasn't merely about corporate gatherings or formal apologies. It revolved around the alarming ease with which individuals like Paula could determine who was worthy of respect and the necessity of demonstrating that such judgments would no longer go unchallenged. They stepped into an elegant, serene lounge where several executives were present. Each one stood up in deference upon noticing Jacob and Tessa. There was no hint of her being out of place. Not at this moment. Jacob guided her to a chair and then turned to face the small assembly. Before we move on to the next steps, he stated with conviction, "I want everyone to grasp something important." He gently rested a hand on Tessa's shoulder. "This isn't merely about a single error. It's about the kind of organization we aspire to become in the future." Tessa gazed up at him, a sense of pride swelling within her. For the first time since that embarrassing incident on the plane, she permitted herself a genuine smile. Those who had attempted to diminish her would now confront a reality in which she and others like her could no longer be overlooked so effortlessly. Justice was not merely being delivered today, it was being established for the future. In the lounge, the atmosphere was thick with gravity. As Michael Harper spoke to the select group of leading airline executives, each word he uttered resonated profoundly. There was complete silence. No one dared to interrupt or even move. Everyone understood the gravity of the situation. "We will not accept discrimination in any form, in any cabin, at any level." Jacob declared, his voice firm, yet piercing. "This incident didn't merely humiliate my daughter. It revealed a flaw in the way we engage with our customers." He surveyed the room, locking eyes with each executive before proceeding. "Starting today, all flight and ground personnel will undergo mandatory training. This will be genuine training, not merely signing a document. We will implement secret passengers to evaluate service conduct. There will be swift repercussions for any staff members who treat passengers differently due to appearance, age, background, or any other factor." Tessa observed in silence, a swell of pride rising within her. Her father was not one to make empty promises. When he spoke of change, he truly intended it. Jacob inhaled deeply, his tone becoming gentler as he turned to Tessa. "This goes beyond mere apologies. It's about fostering a culture that not only addresses mistakes when they occur, but actively works to prevent them from happening in the first place." The executives nodded in quick succession, expressing their agreement. Yet it fell short. Jacob directed his gaze toward one of the men at the end of the table. "Stephen Grant, you will prepare a formal apology. This isn't just for Tessa, but for all passengers who have faced unfair treatment. I expect it to be made public. No evasion, no manipulation." Stephen Grant nodded quickly, jotting down notes. Jacob then addressed another woman next to him. "Rachel Evans, initiate internal audits right away. I expect random checks on flights to commence next week. Utilize outside agencies if necessary. I want this executed thoroughly." Rachel Evans responded with a swift, serious nod. Jacob reclined slightly, allowing the impact of his words to resonate. "Let there be no doubt," he stated, his voice resolute once more. "This is deeply personal. If we fail to uphold the dignity of every passenger, no matter their identity, then we are unworthy of leading this industry." The room fell into a heavy silence. After a moment, Jacob stood up, gesturing for Tessa to accompany him. She rose gracefully, aware of the gaze of every executive upon her. However, this time the stairs were not laden with uncertainty. Instead, they carried a sense of respect, an acknowledgement that she had made a genuine impact. As they exited the lounge together, Jacob gently rested his hand on her back. "You didn't need to raise your voice," he said softly. "You didn't have to shout. You held your position and allowed the truth to reveal itself. That's true strength, Tessa." She looked up at him with a smile, feeling more buoyant than she had since Paula had loomed over her seat with that strained, insincere grin. Tessa stated plainly that she wouldn't allow her to determine her value. Jacob let out a gentle laugh. "That's my daughter." As they walked through the exclusive hallways of the airport, staff members swiftly made way, offering respectful nods. The airport was alive with its familiar sounds. Announcements for boarding, wheeled luggage gliding by hushed exchanges. Yet for Tessa, everything felt far away. She confronted a subtle battle and triumphed through her silence, grace, and perseverance. In stark contrast to the ease of the executive lounge, Paula found herself isolated in the same cramped conference room, anticipating a decision she was certain would arrive. The official review has concluded. She had been given the opportunity to express herself, to clarify her thoughts. Yet she sensed that her words held no significance. Her deeds were more telling than words, and they had determined her destiny. She grasped the handle of her carry-on bag, the one she had packed, believing it would be merely another ordinary flight. At that moment, it was everything she had remaining while she awaited security to lead her away. No uniform, no badge, no opportunities for redemption. For years, she had been convinced that her position granted her the power to make hasty judgments about who fit in where. Ultimately, it only required one calm and composed teenage girl to shatter that illusion. A gentle tap echoed at the door. A security officer approached, his demeanor polished, yet detached. "M. Hayes, we are prepared for you now." Paula rose gradually, the wheels of her bag clattering noisily against the floor as she trailed behind him through the airport's side quarters. An alternative route than the one Tessa had chosen, a journey that garnered no admiration. She remained focused on the ground. She avoided making eye contact with anyone. She moved ahead, the burden of her choices more substantial than any baggage she could bear. This time, neither an apology nor an excuse could ease the burden. In the gentle warmth of the afternoon sun, Tessa and Jacob approached a sleek black SUV that was stationed by the entrance of the private terminal. The driver acknowledged with a subtle nod as Tessa entered the back seat, her father trailing closely behind her. The doors shut with a reassuring thud, blocking out the clamor of the airport. As the car glided away effortlessly, Tessa allowed herself to sink into the seat in a state of ease. She glanced out the window, observing the planes queued on the runway, their noses directed toward places she could explore one day on her own terms. She would never be compelled to leave her seat again. Jacob remained quietly by her side for a brief period, allowing her some room. At last, he uttered his words softly. "You see," he remarked, "real strength often lies not in raising your voice, but in remaining steadfast when others anticipate your collapse." Tessa offered a subtle smile, her gaze fixed on the window. She grasped this truth more profoundly than she ever had. Within the airport, the news was circulating rapidly. It wasn't solely the staff who were aware. Passengers were engaged in conversation as well. Videos began surfacing online, featuring brief clips of Tessa being guided back to her designated seat with Paula's stunned expression following closely behind. Individuals were sharing outraged remarks, commending Tessa's composed grace, and pondering how frequently such incidents occurred unnoticed when no one significant was observing. The airline's public relations team worked frantically behind the scenes, crafting statements and keeping an eye on social media as the story picked up steam. What began as a private embarrassment had transformed into a public lesson. This incident was not solely linked to Paula. The airline's reputation was at stake as well. In a cramped room hidden behind one of the terminals, Paula sat in solitude, fixated on her phone. She had noticed the news alerts. She had read the comments. Strangers were identifying her by name, labeling her as arrogant, biased, and heartless. She flipped the phone over, placing it face down on the table, unable to bear the sight of it any longer. None of the justifications she had rehearsed in her mind could amend her actions. None of them seemed persuasive, not even to her own ears. She had dedicated years to cultivating her professionalism, her keen instincts, and her talent for understanding passengers. Yet in this moment, devoid of her uniform and her authority, she recognized that she had misjudged everything. Tessa had been courteous, ready, and perfectly suited to her surroundings, while Paula had been the one who truly felt out of place all along. A security guard approached the door, clearing his throat. It was time. Paula nodded in a daze, rising to grab her small bag. As she moved through the terminal with the guard by her side, she attempted to maintain her composure, but each step felt like a revealing admission. She sensed the eyes of the crowd upon her. Some had already recognized her from the videos making their rounds online. Others simply felt that something was profoundly amiss. No one smiled at her. No one extended any sympathy. She had become invisible. Not in the way she had once made passengers feel, but in the manner of someone whose significance has been entirely erased. Outside on the curb, a nondescript car awaited her. No luxurious black SUV, no special treatment, just a quiet journey home to an uncertain future. She entered silently, shutting the door with a soft click. The car drove off, distancing itself from the lively airport. Paula rested her head against the seat and shut her eyes. Yet the shame, the regret, and the overwhelming finality of her choices lingered. In the SUV, Jacob looked at his daughter, observing her silhouette illuminated by the afternoon sun. "Are you really all right?" he inquired, once more, his tone gentler this time. Tessa nodded, her voice steady. "Yes, I'm certain." She was more than just fine. She had confronted disrespect with quiet resilience. She had stood firm without raising her voice or diminishing her worth. And she had made it clear to all, even those who believed themselves above reproach, that respect was not a privilege granted by wealth or position. It was a fundamental right that every individual should have had from the beginning. From this point forward, all passengers of Brennan Airlines would carry that thought with them. The SUV glided along the highway, distancing itself from the airport and approaching the city skyline. Tessa rested her head against the window, sensing the rhythm of the road beneath her. Her phone buzzed once more, this time inundated with notifications. Friends, classmates, and even acquaintances were reaching out. She received screenshots of news articles, brief video clips from the plane, and posts commending her composure in a crisis. Some messages were brief, yet encouraging. "So proud of you. You managed that like a pro." Some were more extensive, with individuals recounting their own experiences of being ignored, mistreated, and unfairly judged. Tessa browsed through a few, feeling her heart constrict. She understood now that this was no longer solely her narrative. It had grown beyond that. She turned off her phone and placed it down, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Her father allowed the silence to linger pleasantly between them, providing her the space to reflect on everything. He understood more than anyone the weight that unexpected attention could carry, even when it was accompanied by accolades. Meanwhile, at the airport, the public announcement from Brennan Airlines had just been released. A meticulously crafted letter was shared across all official social media platforms, featured on the website, and even printed and displayed on bulletin boards within the terminals. At Brennan Airlines, we uphold the principles of dignity, fairness, and respect for every passenger. Unfortunately, recent incidents on one of our flights did not meet these expectations. We extend our sincere apologies to Miss Emma Carter and to anyone who has ever felt overlooked or undervalued during their travels. We are taking swift action, which includes mandatory retraining for employees' independent audits of our flights and a strict zero-tolerance policy against any form of discrimination. Our commitment is clear. Everyone has a place. The letter circulated rapidly. Media outlets reported on the story. Journalists sought interviews. Conversations flourished online with a mix of anger and hope. Some individuals commended the airline for their swift response to the situation. However, others argued that it should not have required the owner's daughter facing mistreatment for genuine change to occur. Tessa found herself in agreement with them. It shouldn't have come to this. Yet, if her experience could spark a dialogue, if it could allow others to share their voices, then it held significance. Away from the storm of public opinion, Paula remained solitary in her modest apartment. The city lights beyond her window merging into a blurred haze. Her termination from the airline had been officially confirmed. Her employee ID was deactivated and her email account was shut down. She had spent the last few hours sifting through various online comments, her chest tightening with each word. While she hadn't anticipated sympathy, the overwhelming burden of public judgment left her in shock. It wasn't solely about her behavior on the plane. Individuals began to explore various grievances that had been discreetly lodged over the years. Instances of her hasty judgments, cutting tone and impatience had left lasting impressions. She had believed she excelled in her role. She had assumed she was held in high regard. Yet she now recognized how minor unaddressed incidents had contributed to a reputation she was unaware of. Paula grabbed her phone and navigated to the draft of an email she had begun earlier. It was a heartfelt apology meant for Tessa. She hadn't hit send yet. A part of her questioned if it was even significant at this point. Yet another part, the one that still held on to the hope of redemption, understood that it wasn't about whether Tessa would actually read it. It was about owning up to my actions. She resumed typing, her hands trembling a bit. Miss Brennan, I don't seek your forgiveness, and I understand that an apology might not undo my actions, but I want you to know that I recognize my mistakes now. That day, I only perceived what I wanted to, and I let you down. I formed a judgment without truly knowing you. I am truly sorry, not due to being caught, but because I was in the wrong. She gazed at the screen for an extended moment before pressing send. The message drifted into the digital abyss. Uncertain if it would be acknowledged or overlooked, she felt a subtle change within her for the first time in days. A small fissure appeared in the formidable wall of pride she had constructed around herself. Inside the SUV, Tessa's phone buzzed once more, a new email alert lighting up the screen. She paused for a moment, then reached for it quickly, scanning the opening lines of Paula's message. After reading it twice, her expression remained inscrutable. Finally, she put the phone away without responding, opting not to bear the burden of Paula's remorse. Her narrative transcended revenge. It wasn't about compelling others to plead for absolution. It centered on maintaining resolve against injustice and allowing others to grasp their own lessons no matter how long that journey took. As the SUV approached home, the city light shimmered more vividly. Tessa sensed a serene contentment blossoming within her. This was merely a new beginning. This marked the start of a brighter future for her, and perhaps for individuals she would never encounter. Yet, who deserved more? Each time they boarded a plane, entered a room, or occupied any space where they rightfully belonged. The SUV decelerated as it made its way down the lengthy private driveway leading to the Brennan family estate. Majestic trees bordered the road, their leaves whispering softly in the evening wind. The final rays of sunlight dipped low in the sky, enveloping the landscape in a warm golden hue. It was a tranquility that arrived only after a long, arduous day, a tranquility that felt deserved. Tessa gazed at the well-known path ahead, sensing an unusual blend of emotions constricting in her chest. A wave of relief washed over her, mingled with exhaustion, a peculiar sense of pride, and something more profound. It felt as though she had unknowingly embraced a new version of herself. The SUV glided to a gentle halt at the entrance. The driver promptly exited, swinging the door open for Tessa. She emerged slowly, stretching her arms, her backpack draped effortlessly over one shoulder. Jacob followed closely behind her, moving silently as they ascended the marble steps to the house. Once inside, the atmosphere was inviting and illuminated. Staff members acknowledged them with polite nods as they walked by. Yet no one spoke. Tessa made her way directly to the den, her preferred space adorned with large couches, gentle lighting, and shelves brimming with books and family photographs. She let her backpack fall to the floor and settled into a spacious chair, tucking her legs beneath her. Jacob trailed behind, placing a hefty file on the coffee table before taking the seat opposite her. For several moments, silence enveloped them. The house buzzed softly in the background, with the faint clink of dishes from the kitchen and the muted murmur of conversations nearby. At last, Jacob leaned in, placing his elbows on his knees. His tone had softened, lacking the authoritative quality he typically displayed in board meetings. "You know," he said, observing her intently, "what you accomplished today wasn't solely for your own benefit." Tessa met his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "You demonstrated to every young person who has felt overlooked that they truly matter." Jacob remarked, "You demonstrated to the observers that silence carries weight. You demonstrated to my company that arrogance and bias have no place in our environment." "Not anymore." Tessa felt a knot form in her throat, but she pushed it back. She refused to let tears fall. "Not tonight." Jacob's smile was rare and genuine, easing the harsh lines etched on his face. "Today, you imparted lessons far beyond what any meeting or memo could convey." Tessa leaned back, absorbing his words. In the moment, it hadn't seemed courageous. It simply felt essential. Yet perhaps that was the essence of true strength. Acting in accordance with what is right, even when no one offers you a platform, even when the simpler option is to retreat. She cast a look at the hefty file Jacob had placed down the new policies he was implementing in response to recent events, a legacy that transcended any single flight. Greater than a fleeting moment, the world beyond carried on, bustling and noisy and intricate. Yet within this house tonight, a profound change had taken root. Later, when she found herself alone in her room, Tessa once more scrolled through her phone. Her inbox was inundated with messages of encouragement. Classmates she hadn't connected with in months, teachers, and even unfamiliar faces reached out. However, she hesitated when she spotted Paula's email once more. This time, she took the time to read it thoroughly. The phrasing was awkward, yet sincere. Tessa chose not to reply. There was no need. Occasionally, true development occurs not through replies, but through contemplation. Paula would need to navigate her own path now, without support or readily given forgiveness to soothe her. Tessa set her phone down on the nightstand face down and gazed out the window at the stars appearing in the vast blue sky. She felt no anger now. She wasn't even harboring bitterness. A profound sense of calm and strength began to take root in her chest. It was a resolve that regardless of her life's path or the doubts cast by others, she would always hold on to this moment. The moment she demonstrated not only to those around her, but also to herself that she was worthy of every space she entered, every chair she occupied, and every chance she pursued. The world may not always embrace her wholeheartedly. It may still doubt her place within it, but she would never doubt it herself again. She understood that this kind of conviction was more formidable than anything anyone could attempt to strip away. As she shut her eyes and slipped into slumber, Tessa recognized that this was not the conclusion of her journey. This is just the start. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories on the way. Tessa Carter's story teaches us that respect and fairness are basic rights for everyone, regardless of appearance, age, or social status. Judging others based on stereotypes, as Paula did, is not only hurtful, but can also have serious consequences. Tessa, despite being treated unfairly, remained calm and confident, demonstrating that true strength lies in maintaining dignity in the face of adversity. The story also highlights the importance of accountability for wrongdoing, which, if left uncorrected, can destroy reputations and careers. In today's American society, where cultural and ethnic diversity is a hallmark, this story reminds us to avoid judging based on appearances. Stereotypes can appear in the workplace, in schools, or in public spaces, causing discrimination and inequality. To apply this lesson, we need to practice openness listening and treating everyone fairly. Organizations like Brennan Airlines in the story should conduct diversity and inclusion training and adopt a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Individuals need to reflect on their own behavior, stand up against injustice, and learn to sincerely apologize when they make a mistake, as Paula did. By practicing respect and accountability, we build a just society where everyone feels valued.